It's been 9 months since I last shared an update on our project. I'd planned to make one video a month, but having a roof over my head, keeping the elements at bay meant longer work days. My evenings of editing were consumed by the passion to finish what we started in January 2024. And the race against the rain was on. The day the roof was delivered, I noticed the framing lined up, and I appreciated all the layers of timber in their approved places. I thought about the possibilities ahead. We've planned a lot to achieve the finished product, but there were also things to plan as the project developed. I had to consider colours for the roof and aluminium joinery, flooring, lighting, electrical switch plates, and the route for running hundreds of metres of cables. I was thinking about these things long before we started building the frames. I'm eager to get building, so it's good to have willing helpers ready to pass tools and hold ends. Some family members donated an old timber door from an old family batch that had been demolished. We planned to use this door as our main door, but before I could order the window joinery, I needed to ensure we could machine the door to suit the aluminium door jamb. I missed a crucial detail and needed to adapt our framing to suit an odd-sized door that had been made during the Great Depression. If you use a computer regularly, you'd know the key command Control or Command Z, undo. Unfortunately, undo on a building site means unscrewing, nail pulling and remachining, which is a slow process. With a week's wait for our roofing iron to be ready, and the autumn rains graciously easing enough for a few days, it was time to piece together all the scaffolding we could muster and make the most of the cooler temperatures and slightly overcast skies, a time we had longed for during the burning months of summer. A new relaxing pace had set in for filling, sanding and painting all the barge boards ready for a new roof. Every life has a beginning and an end, filled with many intricate situations and challenges that occur along the way. Just as in life, if we don't have a goal, we will end up in a place we don't expect. In building, we need a plan. A plan requires forethought, not just in the initial stages of getting plans drawn up and approved by the council, but also in the process and sequence of addressing each step of the building process. We are building a home studio, so I can start a business making the most of the technical skills I have learned throughout my life, including more recently, working for a church. We decided to add a skylight to allow for plenty of natural light and offset the lack of windows along the black wall, another challenge that required some forethought around the order in which things were fitted. Thankfully, we decided to order the flashings after the rest of the corrugated iron had been completely installed, and that meant we had a bit of play to ensure all the correct clearances were maintained around the skylight flashings. But before the roof arrived, we must install the roof underlay, the final barrier to any potential moisture making its way into the studio below. When the roofing arrived, it was a surprisingly small load compared to other orders on the truck, but that did not mean we could lift the whole pack by ourselves. The iron was laid on our driveway, which we then moved by hand, 2 sheets at a time. As we continued putting on the underlay, we discovered we didn't have enough. I was 6 meters short in my calculations, and getting another roll was going to put the rest of the work on hold. And I realised we wouldn't be able to finish the roof in one day as anticipated. My plan of having a single gable roof meant that it should be simple enough to do ourselves. After much deliberation, I realised I could just work backwards from the skylight. It did mean the roof would not mirror the opposite side, but only my drone would ever see the slight offset of about 12 millimeters. I was happy to make that compromise and not have to move the skylight off centre from the ceiling below. Had I known that we needed more than one day, I would have waited for a longer dry spell. It was a good reminder that although we have a clear and careful plan to continue making progress on a budget, there is also an element of faith and risk. By the end of day 2, I was finally able to fix down the ridge flashing as the early evening dew started forming on our new roof. We had managed to get the roof on without any rain, and I managed to get off the roof before it became slippery. The next day, unexpectedly, it was clear and sunny, so I finished fixing the remaining screws. With no sign of rain, Jay and I got straight to work putting on the building wrap. Jay used a 50mm galvanised washer to measure the specified height of 50mm overlap below the floor level and to keep the roll parallel. With the start of daylight saving, our daylight hours were reduced and the floodlight kicked into action to provide an extra hour for putting up some polythene and stop the rain coming in where the firewall is to be installed. The next day we picked up our first load of jib to make the external layer of our firewall so we could finish putting up the last section of building wrap. I learned the hard way that if you are cutting an angled piece of jib, hoping to use the offcut on the opposing side, you need to remember that it will be facing the wrong way. Luckily we could use it on the interior layer of the firewall, but that meant another trip to the hardware store to get another sheet before Jay and I covered the jib with building paper, ready for the next lot of wet weather. For the first time, I was able to make use of a sheltered space, and not just any space, a space we had made with our own hands. Although the roof was solid, every gust of wind made the building wrap rattle. But inside, even with cooler temperatures and rain becoming more frequent, I could still continue painting and cutting the soffites ready for the next sunny day. Murray pointed out that if I hung the soffites before fitting the flashings, they could become rain traps. So as I waited for our order of flashings to arrive, I caught up with a quick coat of paint. And although the flashings were oversized and made to cut down, I realised that there is quite a method of cutting and folding the ends to ensure a tidy finish. I was up for the task and managed to not mess up a single one. Nipping out small segments made it easier to manoeuvre the tin snips, and I was very grateful for Murray's twin set of left and right cutting tin snips. The flashings took a bit to fit, but I managed to work it out fairly quickly. It was just a fiddly job, but the weather was nice, the temperature was cool, and I found myself free to think about what was next. I often wondered if completing one task might hinder or prevent me from doing another task further down the track. It turns out it would have been a lot more challenging to nail in soffites after all the cavity battens were nailed in. I could see how that could catch some people out. With the final flashing sealed and screwed into place, we were now ready to start hanging the soffites. Having Murray's help once again has been a real blessing. Having an extra set of hands that can reach higher than the kids, especially on the scaffolding, and the addition of wider knowledge than my own, helped me to keep on top of making careless mistakes. We kept to the plan, and Murray made sure that I was placing orders for the next stage so we would not be held up. Laura helped me hang the soffites along the back wall, and we finished the last of the builder's wrap and stapled the blue tape ready for the cavity battens. The corners were sealed with bitumen flashing tape, and we started to hang the gutters. I began cutting to length all the cavity battens so we could keep attaching them until we ran out of sunlight and nails. The next day, my brother arrived to help nail the cavity battens around the rest of the studio. Thankfully, I remembered we needed a plastic extrusion, a cavity closer, fitted behind the battens to seal the gap between the weatherboards and the timber frames. I had left out the bottom nails so it could be fitted later. The following day, our window joinery arrived on schedule, so I cut the building paper where the sliding door would go, so we could bring it all inside out of the elements. But before the window joinery could go in the window cavity, they needed to be waterproof with bitumen flashing tape and plastic protective corners to ensure there was no chance moisture could penetrate around the window joinery. The windows all seemed to go in very easily after fitting the sliding door, the biggest and heaviest of the lot, and my brother and I managed to fit them without too much stress. In Christian circles, we often talk about being covered, and that God's community of people look out for those vulnerable and in need. Be that a practical need or a relational need, Christians tend to stand out for their love for each other. Murray has been one who faithfully cared for us when we needed it. As I contemplate having a new space sheltered from the storms, I began to see new hope as I heal from a heartache that most people won't ever know about. Perhaps the most significant covering we can have is one that enables vulnerability. Isn't that exactly what makes any relationship or family thrive?